the last session is our case-based discussion, and unfortunately, Dr. Chandran was not able to join with us. And instead of that, Dr. Manoj Unni is leading us on the moderating sessions, and Dr. Chitresh from Amrita is presenting the case, and our panelists will be Dr. Mobin Pal, Dr. Chepsi, and Dr. Shinto, and if time permits, Dr. Nitin may join us. So with this, Dr. Chitresh, it's yours.
Good evening, everyone. Myself, Dr. Chitresh. I'm a first-year PG resident in DM Clinical Hematology at Amrita Institute of Medical Science. At the outset, I would like to thank organizers for giving me a chance to present the case in such a esteemed conference and in front of all the great faculties. And to myself is also present Dr. Manoj Unni. Coming to the today's case, patient named Mr. MP Joshi. He's a 54-year male from Ernakulam. He's a moderately built, middle-income man from he was working as a manager in a private firm in a Middle East. His present illness, currently he's a relapsed case of chronic lymphocytic leukemia on tablet ibrutinib. Coming to his clinical details as how the disease progressed and how over the year the disease evolved, we'll go back to the 2019 when he was incidentally detected as leukocytosis with lymphocytic predominance back in 2019 on incidentally on a routine blood checkup, where on initial investigation his hemoglobin was 14 milligram, total count was around 11,600 with predominance of lymphocyte, out of which 21% lymphocytes were atypical, along with many smudge cells. There was no organomegaly, no lymphadenopathy, and he was initially followed up irregularly by the general physician. Then, in view of persistent leukocytosis for 2 years, and now he developed neck swelling also, which was on the right cervical area, largest was 1 centimeter. He was evaluated further for the disease. And on peripheral blood flow cytometry in November 2011, at the 44 years of age, he was found to have CLL. At that time, his CBC parameters were hemoglobin 14.4, total count 13.5, and lymphocyte being 65%, majority of cells, with platelet and hemoglobin were within the normal limit. Peripheral blood was normocytic, normochromic, with predominance of lymphocytosis and smudge cells. On peripheral blood flow cytometry, on gating the lymphocytes, they were positive, highly positive for CD19, CD5, CD45, and HLA-DR, and they were moderately positive for CD23, CD11, and 20, and were negative for T cell markers and other markers like CD25, 22, 10, 34, kappa, surface immunoglobulins, lambda, and other markers. But on checking for CD28, it was 12% positivity, and ZAP70 was showing 21% positivity. A final impression of chronic lymphocytic leukemia B cell type was suggested on flow cytometry, peripheral blood. Other investigations on the initial diagnosis was on karyotyping. He was having the model karyotype of 46XY, which is normal. There was no cytogenetic abnormality on the fish. Lymph node biopsies of the upper cervical lymph node, which was positive for PAX5, BCL2, 23, CD5, and weakly positive for 20 with high Ki index of 30%. Features were similarly suggesting of CLL bar SLL. Serum LDH was within normal limit, and there was hypogammaglobulinemia. So coming to the prognostic parameters, he was a middle-aged male with comorbidities of hypertension, Rise stage 1 with lymphocytosis and lymphadenopathy, Binet stage A with hemoglobin more than 10, platelet above 1 lakh, and less than 3 areas of lymph nodes were involved at the time of diagnosis with only cervical lymphadenopathy. He was only on the regular follow-up and observation at that time. Subsequently, for following him for continuously, there was on the CBC parameters in 2012 to 2016, his hemoglobin and platelet were within normal limit, and there was very little fluctuation in the hemoglobin and platelet count. But seeing the total WBC count, it was gradually increasing, but there was no rapid rise in the WBC parameters. WBC from 2012 rise from 20,000 to 44,000 in 2016, with lymphocyte being 56% to 63%. Then slowly the disease, in between this monitoring, he had subsequent malignancy. In 2014, he developed a midline neck swelling. On evaluation, it was found to have a papillary carcinoma of thyroid, for which he underwent a total thyroidectomy with central lymph node clearance and high dose radioiodine therapy. The lymph node were free of thyroid malignancies, but the 2 right cervical lymph node, which he also had during the initial presentations, were positive for CLL/SLL. Coming to some family history, he also had a strong family history of carcinoma thyroid to the mother, which was diagnosed at 64 years of age, also to the younger brother at the 30 years of age. Like all the patients of CLL, our patient was also not very lucky. He also had 2 infections in 2015 and 17, for which he was hospitalized. In 2015, he had left lower lobe fungal pneumonia, which was treated for almost 6 weeks with voriconazole, and later there was a clinical as well as radiological and cultural negativity, and then he was discharged. In 2017, he developed fever with blood culture positivity for Rhazoltelia monotilica, and then he was on culture report. He was treated with cefoperazone sulbactam for 14 days after the first negative culture, and then subsequently he was discharged. In February 2017, his lymphocytes shows rapid doubling within the 6 months. So a tumor board meeting held in that this case was discussed, and a plan was suggested to treat him with FCR regimen in 2017. He received 6 cycles of FCR regimen. Last was given in July 2017. He developed the first complete remission after the 6 cycles. His hemoglobin was 11, total count was 8,1700, neutrophil this time being the predominant one, with lymphocyte being only the 9%. Platelet was 1.5 lakh, and then he was on a regular follow-up. In 2018, he had again a relapse of CLL with total count rise to 97,000, along with a new lymph nodes in the submental region. But hemoglobin and platelets were within normal limit. A whole body PET CT was done, which showed FDGV, avid, supra and infradiagrammatic lymph node, along with bilateral cervical level 1B, 2, 3, and 4 lymph node, which largest being the 2 centimeter in the level of 1B, along with diffuse tonsillar swelling. There were no organomegaly this time again. Lymph node biopsy from level 1B again showed the features of CLL/SLL. This time he was planned to give 6 cycles of R-Benda, but unluckily after the 3rd cycle on November 2018, he developed skin lesions, which were bullous skin lesions, and on dermatological evaluation, it was suggested that it's a drug-induced lesions, with skin biopsy showing intraepidermal bulla and dermal deposits of eosinophil, likely drug-induced. And previously also he has taken 6 cycles of rituximab, this type also. So a drug of bendamustine drug allergy was suspected. He was started on steroids, completed treatment in July 2017 with resolution of the lesions. and the further doses of R-Venda was deferred. In 2019, he had a sudden platelet fall. We thought, is it a disease progression or what? But luckily, we found that it is a dengue-induced thrombocytopenia. Then the patient recovered from it, discharged, and he was on follow-up. Then the options of ibrutinib or allogenic stem cell transplantation was discussed, and patient wanted some time for the decision for the same, and he planned, and more time he wanted because he was going out of India for a longer stay for his work in the Middle East. As he was not able to take a decision for the disease, he was started with tablet chlorambucil 5 milligram BD 2 out of 7 days. Then the time of COVID pandemic first time came. He was on chlorambucil only for 2 months in the later half of 2019 without the treatment in the first 3 months of 2020. Disease progressed. This time in 2020, whole body PET CT shows bilateral supra and infradiaphragmatic lymph node with persistently diffuse asymmetrical uptake in bilateral tonsils, and also increase in the total WBC count with no organomegaly at this time again. In April 2020, he was started with, after cardiac clearance, he was started with tablet ibrutinib 420 milligram once in a day, and he was regularly follow-up. They were initially weekly follow-up were there of CBC, but to present the data, I have gathered the 2020 CBC parameter on which his hemoglobin and platelets were usually all the time since the diagnosis were within normal limit. As there was increased WBC count, the decision was to started with ibrutinib was taken. After the starting from lymph node, as we all expect on ibrutinib, there were the peripheral pooling. Subsequently, the WBC started coming down. Later, like patient is currently on ibrutinib. After continuation of ibrutinib, he had 2 surgeries. First of eye, where he has a phacoemulsification for cataract surgery with posterior chamber intraocular lens implantation, and in 2021 he had left mastoidectomy with tympanoplasty. During this period, his ibrutinib was stopped for 1 week before the surgery and was discontinued 1 week post surgery to reduce the chance of bleeding. In April 2020, his latest CBC shows hemoglobin of 10.3, total count of 9,300, lymphocyte being 39% and platelet being 3 lakh, with CBC of normocytic normochromic anemia. In a summary, a 46-year male of which was diagnosed as CLL with FISH negativity, had complete relapse for 1 year after FCR therapy, 6 cycles, then 3 cycles of R-Venda, which was truncated due to drug toxicity, failed chlorambucil metronomic therapy, then maintaining the complete relapse on ibrutinib since April 2000. Since starting from April 2020 to 2021. Thank you.
Dr. Manoj?
Yeah.
Dr. Manu, you
thank
can go ahead with the discussions.
Yeah, thank you, Chitresh, for that presentation. So this case signifies that we could see right from beginning how things went on throughout the starting from his asymptomatic stage till multiple relapses, as well as he required multiple chemotherapies. So, Dr. Chepsi, what would your view on this case?
Yeah, thank you, sir. So nice presentation, Dr. Chitrish.
Thank you, sir.
Well, welcome to the group.
Thank you, sir.
So I think it is a very practically something that we all see, particularly this flow that you showed earlier. It is very common that we don't see these typical features of CLL in all the flow. Like you showed, I think if I remember right, you gave a CD23 negative, FMC negative, CD22 negative, no light chain restriction.
Yes, sir.
I think it is common. I don't know, for some reason it is common in our practice that we don't get these typical features. If you typically follow the CLL IPT score, ideally it will not fit into your CLL. Ideally, but I recognize this. This is what many of us see in practice, and then we treat it as CLL. Sometimes we label it as CD5 negative, CD10 negative, or we have this. I don't know. Probably our our diagnostics have to probably improve in diagnosis. So this is one. First, the diagnosis itself would have got us confusing earlier, and I'm sure after that we wouldn't have got a good diagnostics because he was exposed to many therapies. But practically, I think you've followed a great plan here. But personally, I am not yet started using BTK inhibitors. I would have probably strategized it as because the patient had responded to FCR earlier. I probably would have considered maybe a chlorambucil R in preference to chlorambucil alone if the BR was showing a drug allergy to bendamustine.
Okay.
I think practically that is the only other thing I would have thought of because I have issues in giving this drug. Otherwise, I think if I have all the choices, I probably would have followed the same strategy.
Yeah, but he was going to the Middle East, so we couldn't. They couldn't put the rituximab. He wanted to take the tablets and then go away from India. So the rituximab was just not considered because of his logistic effects.
Perfect, sir.
So,
I think it makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so next, Dr. Sriraj, what would have been your way of approach for this case, which has been asymptomatic till multiple relapses and chemotherapy? Dr. Sriraj?
Dr. Mobin, Sriraj is not available at this time. Can you take it, that question? Sriraj, Mobin? Yeah.
How would you approach this case, Mobin, given the chance that he was asymptomatic in 2009 till 2021? Would you have a different approach, or what would be your algorithm for seeing this case in our setup we have?
Yeah, sir, I just wanted to clarify this skin lesions following bendamustine, which we often see when we use BR, maybe by 3rd, 4th cycles. And it used to last, once you stop also beyond. Is that same kind of lesion, or it's like an anaphylaxis to bendamustine?
No, it was the regular bendamustine-induced itchy lesions, which we usually see by end of 3rd or 4th cycles of bendamustine, and which persists for even after that. So, if this patient had very intensive lesions all over his body, and so one couldn't proceed beyond 3. In many cases, of using bendamustine and other diseases, we do use steroid cover and continue the thing, especially if it is a mild reactions. But for this patient, it was really difficult to proceed. So we had to stop it, after 3 cycles. It was a classical bendamustine-induced reaction, which our dermatologists are they are very experienced seeing and get diagnosed as early as possible.
This is the way we can manage it in our settings, sir. Just manage it very reasonably, appropriately.
So
this is before initiating ibrutinib. We regularly get involved with the hepatologist to look at the liver status.
Yes, we get the hepatitis workup done. We also proceed for cardiology workup, and we especially discuss with the patient about atrial fibrillation. And then the cardiologist also tells about the pros and cons of this. So they're very well aware of that before they start ibrutinib. We also get a hepatitis C antibodies as well as the pre-op serology workup done before actually initiating them on ibrutinib. And if there's any something like that, then before any rituximab or anything, we definitely get a hepatitis workup done. If necessary, get a cardiology, gastroenterology involved in that.
I use this 140 mg for child CLD, and they do very good with this 140. So anybody reduce the dose in view of financial constraints?
No, this patient could, even now he's able to afford the same tablets. So we don't have so many on, I think 2 or maximum 3 people on ibrutinib, and they're doing on their own. One is, I think, on insurance, and other people are they're doing it on their own. But they're not being. We don't have to reduce any dose as of now.
To the Mubin's question, I have a patient with the CLD with the hepatitis B flare-up on ibrutinib, along with medications as well as with the ibrutinib, and the full dose is being continued, fortunately. But he is compensated liver disease, mild derangement of this one without prothrombin affection. The albumin was relatively preserved with the AGOTPT around the 60s range, but he is continuing. Touchwood for the last 7 months is doing fine.
Is it okay? Okay.
You are asking about the child age score regarding CLD.
I was giving them once a day.
Regarding the ones no, in fact, I am full dose. I am giving it with this one. There was no problem. That's what I would like to say.
Okay, so Dr. Deepak Chaz is here. So what would he suggest? How you view this?
No, he is not available. Instead of that, Dr. Shinto is there, and Chepsi can take over.
Dr. Shinto, what would your approach be, and would be different or something, or same, or how would you view this, such a case with the long-standing durations?
Yeah, as Dr. Chepsi said, this is an unusually typical CLL, textbook kind of CLL. So I agree to that. One thing I would have done is do a repeat fish at the time of the at least at the time of change to ibrutinib. Because this is some idea which I got implanted from Dr. Maman sir. He had stressed on this repeat fish and to see the biology, why it has gone. It's not that typical at that stage. So do a repeat fish, probably maybe the last relapse, not in 2017, maybe when the switch to ibrutinib happened, a fish could have been done to look because the earlier was negative. Whether it is 17 HP. That's my only suggestion.
Yeah, that's right. That I agree with Dr. Shinto saying that as the new guidelines also says that before any start of any new protocol, we should do a fish to see if the progression or worsening of the parameters. That is there, yes. But this is quite rare disease, and these algorithms are yet to sink in. Thank you, Shinto.
Manoj, for the question contained in the context of Dr. Shinto's question. Now, repeat fish, even if you are doing it, we may pick up the routine what we are expecting. But still we are missing it. So the problem is we are end up in using the entire 57 genetic leukemia genetic markers. And is there any way we can tune it for 1 or 2 gene markers anybody is doing, like for a CLL P53, something like that? If not SF3, SF3P or something like that, only P53, anything that I think we need to look into that, because now the protocol says that P53 is a must, whether it is an initial or relapsed when you are thinking about it. And we are not doing it because it's not necessary that it will pick up.
I am not sure they're doing separately one, but then mostly it's panels what they do, and then that cost exceeds. But then I think that's fine because, so for routinely we've not been doing everybody because of probably the large panels which is involved.
Even some of the people are saying that even the leukemia genetic marker, the P53 may not be sometimes picked up all the time. Something they were telling that. I'm not sure about that. Shinto, anything on that information? Like when we are doing that leukemia genetic marker 57, P53, sometimes will it pick up all the time?
No, we do as a generic package kind of this MedGenome. Not really looking into specifics of anything.
Like FLD3 may not be picked up, something like that.
I have a question to my panel members. Whether if it's a stage 0 RAI, in a stage 0 RAI, asymptomatic, so is baseline fish done by everyone, or if say it is a stage 0 fish 17P is positive, is there any indication to treat? Not really, right? So
No.
may not do
Absolutely. When you are not
No.
stage 0, when you are saying it, we are not going to treat it. When you are not going to treat it,
No,
we are in
also
Indian
the-
scenario. Indian scenario, not in a research institutions. We are not going to do that.
Yeah.
But again, the handicap is that even when you are doing the fish, we are not doing the P53, which is a must
Yeah.
in the current scenario. That is the reason.
Sir, it is not that we have to do the P53. Probably the practical approach would be like what we are already doing. Fish you get and do. And only in cases which fish is going to miss, probably the role of, because cost is really an issue. Because P53 is only to catch those small subset of patients who are actually 17P deletion negative, but
Deletion
still might have a P53 mutation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The second thing is, in the same context, karyotyping, I have not done for the CLL. Now, we know that the complex karyotyping 3, 5, Dr. Lada lucidly narrated, but anybody is doing the karyotyping in a bone marrow. As such, we are not doing the bone marrow when you are not going to treat the patient. Even if you are going to treat the patient, we are going to do the fish, which is be done invariably in the peripheral blood. And the cytopenia, if it is not a DCT positivity, we are going to attribute to the disease process in general. Of course, we may have to do that. But what my question is that, are we doing the karyotyping for any CLL patient? But we know that complex karyotyping,
No.
all other things.
We are not doing so.
I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. That's what I'm just doing for the fish, and then we're getting away with that. So that is the thing.
Practically, the option is either BR and serious
No,
lesion
but
70.
actually, because of when I was in Gulf, actually they were doing a FCR, because majority of the time Gulf countries will follow the UK-based protocol most of the time. So UK people are fond of FCR-based regimen. If you talk anyone from the UK, they will say they will insist on the FCR. Whereas in US, they are comfortable with the BR-based regimens. So I am not seeing after coming here, probably Manoj and anybody can say that FCR is the one which will be used left and right. But after coming here, that BR is the one which we are using it on this one. Of course, FCR most of the time, it does have a problems, and of course, neutropenia, cytopenia, future MDS invitation, everything is there. And especially what we have seen is when it is crossing the 4th or 5th cycle, when the cytopenia prolongs, when the patient does have not able to complete the 6th cycle, probably that may be the incidences which we can think about it. But otherwise, Manoj.
Yeah, the young people who are fit, I think the last few years we did give FCRs, and the later cycles had really quite severe neutropenia, which lasted for a long time. I think the 5th and 6th cycles we had to actually, I think the last we had dose reduce actually because of the severe neutropenic prolongation. They were young actually, they were in the 40s and early 50s, but then beyond it, we had to go beyond only for R-Benda. And that of course is doing very smoothly with people. They're doing very well. I think we, in the process of treating with the FCR and R-Benda, now with the ibrutinib has come, it's still yet to sink in. Acalabrutinib takes even more time. The FCR and BR, because we get biased towards BR because of the lesser toxicity and less chance of sepsis. But again, having said that, we have given FCR for the younger individuals, and they're still on follow-up and they're still doing well. So it's toxic, definitely. It's only towards the end, last 5 or 6 cycles, the 5th or 6th cycles, they become that the problem neutropenia actually sinks in, and neutropenic periods prolong more than what is actually mentioned in the protocols. So yeah, maybe.
Anybody is doing IGHV mutations now? Till now, we are just going with the CD38, even though there is no concordance 70-30% or something like that. But anybody like IGHV, Manoj, being the institutions, anything on a protocol theoretical research?
No. We're not been doing that specifically.
So but the company is coming out with the some of the companies are coming with doing this one. Not sure whether
Magino people are doing. They have the CLL fish panel having IGHV, P50, 17P, and I think 11 and I think 13. Notch, I'm not sure. These 5 markers I think they're doing that has the IGHV. That they're doing,
what are the 3 markers?
I think IGHV, 17P, 12, and 11Q. I think 13 also they're doing, because fish myeloma also they're doing 13 and all those things. So IGHV, I remember doing that. I have to check. I think they're doing.
They're doing molecular panel with the Notch, IGHV, this the P53 and
SF3P and other things.
YDD, 4, 5. I'm not used.
Manoj?
Yeah, I think that's it. I don't have much more to say, because it's not that we have lots of cases. We have a few are still on follow-up, actually, asymptomatic CLL. They are still on 3 monthly, 6 monthly follow-up. But then a few of them have post-FCR, some of them are post-Benda, and then 2 or 3 are on ibrutinib. So that's all our CLLs are all about.
Anyone use ibrutinib for low-grade relapsed lymphoma in elderly?
No.
I have a few.
Please share your experience.
No. Very old people, mantle, third relapse, and splenic marginal zone, 80-year-old. Actually, low-grade lymphomas, either single or combined with the rituximab, they are doing fine actually. And 2 are there on, like CLD with the 140 mg OD. Those guys also doing fine. Almost some 8-9 months time now. So I used it for aggressive lymphoma, few patients, but I guess it can't pace the growth of DLB still. When we can't give injectable chemos, elderly people, when they relapse, high-grade relapses, 2-3 patients we tried, we didn't work out. But low-grade outside that recommendation, very elderly people with reasonable performance status can be tried.
I have a case of mantle cell leukemia, 79-year, ibrutinib, and is tolerating till now, no problem, full dose. In fact, I am going for 4 tablets, like a mantle cell lymphoma. And he had the one asymptomatic on a routine clinical examination, which I have put it forward that this one atrial fibrillations. So now we are giving it 3 now. Well, I'm a bit scared.
That's interesting.
Manoj, anything?
If I'm not yet, I don't know. And people on this had acute MI, they put on dual antiplatelet. What days not much of bleeding. Then one patient had a mediastinal, just like nodes which biopsy to have TB. TB reactivation was there. So one mediastinal EBUS biopsy, another had a intestinal granuloma, which we thought initially was beta-hepatitis disease, but biopsy was granuloma. 2 patients.
Regarding this particular case, in view of this infection association with the ibrutinib, he had some fungus infections. He was treated with the oriconazole in the interim period. So being put on the ibrutinib, as we have some of the cases has been studied that there was a flare-up of the fungal infections. So probably we may have to put on antifungal and dose reduction caveat. Something has been thought about it?
Yeah, there's no dose reduction, Ramaswamy, for this. He had a fungal infection in 2017, 2 or 3 years ago.
That's correct. 3-4 years back. Having set the history, so they are even that time he didn't have any medication. Even he didn't have any chemoimmunotherapy. At that point of time, he had the infection. So all the more when he is put on that, there is a chance of flare-up of the fungal infection being the common sense. So probability of adding some antifungal with the dose reductions of ibrutinib.
Yeah, there was with
with the antifungal.
He's not
That
an
time
Indian, he's only
Orikonoso. That time Orikonoso.
No, yeah.
Now
only
he is
that
not on
time.
it.
He was seen by infectious disease department and they told there is no more need to do anything. And he has been asymptomatic since then. He never had any problem after that. He after that almost 2 years have passed. Now he's ibrutinib since almost a year. He never had any issues with ibrutinib also. He had this cholesteatoma in the in the ear for which he underwent a surgery just 2 months ago. And that was anyway more of infection. There was no evidence of any fungus in that or anything else. So that was the prime reason we had stopped a week before of the surgery, ibrutinib, and we started a week after. But then there was no infection complications at all for the most the 1 year he was on actually on that. But of course, we have kept it in our sight that he had a whole history of fungal infection. So we haven't started any prophylactic fungal as yet. He didn't have any problems at all for the last 1 year.
He mentioned hypogammaglobulinemia, but what about the current gamma globulin status? Because he had a mastocytitis, unexplained mastocytitis. Why should you have it? So
IgG level is slightly low, but IgM, IgA is normal.
IgG is
530, slightly lower.
So maybe the reasons.
Issue, right? The FACO emulsification, something was done. What was that?
Eyes for the cataract.
Okay. Because ibrutinib can cause something called a cystoid macular edema, which we had published from Rajiv Gandhi.
Okay.
So this is not that, I believe.
No, this is not. This was basically he had the other major surgery was the cholesteatoma.
Okay.
Right. If any questions to be discussed? Okay, if there is nothing left out. So thanks once again, Dr. Chitresh, personally as well as from the CSG forum perspective, and hope we can continue to enlighten ourselves each other in the coming days with your leadership, like Dr. Manoj and everyone. Okay, so hoping to see you for the next presentation in the near future, if one is being arranged by active Dr. Mopin. Shinto, nice to see you after a long time as well as So take care, stay safe. Bye. Winding up at this time. Thank you very much for all of you being joining with us. Once again, even though in his absence, I would like to thank Dr. Nitin for his valuable time in the early morning to come with us and enlighten our knowledge. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.